Can the right partnership make you millions? Haha, I bet it can. And we're going to talk about that. Welcome to another episode of The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I'm your host, Catryn Becker. And in this podcast, we talk to the most incredible people so that we can learn what they have learned in their career that has made them so successful. Because it's not just about the wins, it's also about the failures, the wrong turns, the U-turns, the dead ends, everything that we have learned along the way that has brought us that success. My guest today, you know him, you love him. If you are a follower of this podcast, you heard him in episode 10 and again in episode 50. It is the one and only Adam Coffey. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Catryn, it's good to see you again. Hello to all your listeners. They say the third time is a charm. So hopefully the third time will be the best yet. I'll have to keep on writing books so I can keep on coming back and seeing you.
I would absolutely love that because your newest book, well, it's the newest updated book. It's your second book, correct?
Yeah, I'm actually in an off year. So Empire Builder came out last year, and I owe a book every 2 years. And so this is supposed to be my take a break year. And I decided why not tackle doing this update? That book, the first book, the Private Equity Playbook, it thing still hits number one just routinely. It was number one earlier today,
Wow.
and so I decided, geez, it's like it's 5 years old. I wrote it in 2018. It's like the numbers have changed, the world has changed. We've been through a pandemic, and so I thought, boy, it's time to update that. So I took my off year, and I thought I would sneak in a little magic. It was actually kind of fun because it was the first book, but now redoing it, it's the fourth book, in chronological order. So I could refer to other things I covered in my later books. And so it was like a Back to the Future Marty McFly kind of moment where, it's like I'm talking about books that haven't been written yet in the context of this book. But since it's the fourth, now a redo of the first, it's like I felt like I was having Back to the Future moments, throughout. But it was fun.
Well, it works. It works really well, and we're glad to have the update with the new numbers because the world has changed so much and in such unexpected ways. I mean, who could have possibly predicted the pandemic?
Yeah, certainly not I. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I really wanted to focus this episode on partnerships and how they can be so beneficial or so detrimental depending on the situation. And you have such an interesting partnership with the enigmatic JT Fox, which is how I first met you through his organization. And it's funny, as I was prepping for this, I was watching some of your more recent interviews. And you mentioned in one of them that you only work with JT about 25% of the time. And I felt like that moment when you're a kid and you see a teacher outside of this classroom, like at church or the grocery store, and you're like, you leave here? You don't live at the school? And so it was like, "Oh, only 25% with JT. I'm shocked. I had no idea."
Well, JT and I are partners, and in his world is very public, and it's an out front kind of world, and so between seminars and the things that he and I do together, it's what's mostly visible, I
Mm,
would say. But when I look at like the hours spent, the clients, and all the work that I do, it's about 25% of my company, of my consulting business, which means about 75% is still outside of that world. And I'd say, probably a good third of it at least is still working with private equity firms, helping them evaluate investments, coaching their CEOs and leadership teams, sitting on their boards, and then there's a lot of work with founders, as well, which has actually been a lot of fun. I counted up recently. I'm working with 71 different companies,
oh,
founder-led
wow.
companies, and I'm working in so many different industries. It's been fun. It's been fun looking under the hood of all of these different kinds of businesses and different industries, and getting to know the people. And it's been fun. It's reinvigorated my career. I work more hours today than I ever did as a CEO, including nights, weekends. And so it's a new world. It's still exciting. So I'm having fun. So it's kind of reinvigorated my career.
Well, that's really exciting to hear. And I think that's something that, making the switch, from the more standard corporate world into the entrepreneur world, the hours and when you're working are so different, and that sometimes people don't really anticipate that, but you're kind of following a passion, so it's just different.
It is different. It's not like work, and it's like, hey, I'm most of the days I'm here in my home office. I do have a real office now, and I do go there periodically, but I still spend a lot of time at home, and it gives a lot of flexibility. So it's been fun. Hey, I just turned 60, and
Happy
so it's
birthday.
it's a great way to kind of, I'll call it the next 10 years, of my career are going to be spent doing this. And then I'll reevaluate, call it on the back end of the next 10 years. We'll see what happens next.
And who knows, because you and JT meeting, from the stories he's told, it's been him kind of hounding you a little bit on LinkedIn to get that very first interview.
JT is an acquired taste. I joke with him about that. It's like a fine wine. You got to kind of crack it open, set it off on the side for a while, and let it aerate and build. But it's been fun. It's been fun working with JT. He certainly has expanded my network for sure. And appreciate him very much and all the stuff that we do together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as he'll tell you, he's got the forward in your third book, Empire Builder. So of course that's his
Yes.
favorite, right?
He tells the world it's the second best book in the world. And of course, yeah, yeah. JT's Millionaire, Underdog or whatever it was called, whatever his
Yeah.
book's called. I think that's that's still the best book in the world, but mine's the second best because I dedicated that book to him and to you and to everybody who was at the Empire Builder seminar,
That's right.
which that book started as a seminar.
That's right. It was incredible. So thinking to the 70 different companies that you're working with, all different types of industries, they're probably at all different levels of success. And one thing that I've found is everyone thinks their problems are unique to them. That it's such a, we take an eye focused view of the world and the different personality types. What is sort of your approach when coming into these different industries, to these different levels and different personality types to make these partnerships be successful?
Well, so it's interesting, and just to put some context to it. So I'm working with 71 different companies. I was speaking with my tax partner at Deloitte this morning, and I have 52 K1s this year. So it's like I'm a shareholder, an owner, an investor in 52 different unique companies right now, and so that means I have a lot of partnerships. And I think to your to your earlier point, when I think about these entrepreneurs and relationships, let me just start by saying I think today's generation is different.
Hmm.
And I'm not speaking age wise. I'm speaking just in this generation, founders in general, regardless of age, are just so much more open to building a support network around them, working with a coach, working with a mentor, recognizing that they're not, God's gift to everything and that there is still room to learn in the world. And so as a result, it's like, I'm engaging with people and I'm thinking, boy, if I'd have gone back 20 years ago, I don't know how many founders would have been so open, about their own challenges and the need to surround themselves with other people who might be able to offer, some wisdom that they don't have. So I think definitely people are more open to the idea of coaching and or partnerships and augmenting their own skill set with others, in an attempt to kind of avoid potholes.
Hmm.
And I remember back, I'm 60 now. If I go back into my mid 30s, it's like, boy, I don't see myself being so open to that, back in that era, in context, certainly. But, so I think kudos to the people out there who recognize that there is benefit to be gained from partnering with people. And so, I think I start most of my engagements by really just trying to listen, trying to understand the situation. I have worked in so many industries that I kind of have a methodology of immersing into an industry and getting to understand it. And what I find just myself is that most of our problems, if we pull the industry out of it and just make it generic, there really aren't a lot of new problems. These
Mm.
are variations of common themes that I see regardless of industry. People who wonder, should I make this investment or not? I'm thinking about, buying a company or doing an M&A deal, or my phone's ringing and people are talking about potentially buying my company. And, I'm wondering whether or not that's a good idea or how I should pursue that. It's, so many different companies and industries, but so many common problems, I think
Yeah.
is the underpinning.
Well, and I'm sure, having that repetitive ability to see that, you have that kind of bird's eye aerial view to say, hey, wait, I've seen this so many times. So, yeah, they might not have that same advantage. But I also think I love your point about them being so open. And I wonder if that's a part of the digital age is where we have so much more information now that we know other people are doing things and are open to learning from each other.
That's probably a really good point. Just, the technology's made the world so much smaller. I was teaching a class, at UCLA last night, working with a professor I've known for 15 years, speaking to his class. So first of all, I'm in Texas. He's in Westwood, in LA at UCLA. I'm using technology to beam in. He's got people in a classroom, people online. Half of the student body is from another country to begin with.
Wow.
And it's virtually half the class when I ask, if you were born in another country, raise your hand. And literally it's like half the population there. So the world has become a much smaller place thanks to technology. And you're probably right. That probably is at the cornerstone of it, and the advent of social media and people connecting with other people.
Yeah.
I think probably definitely the key.
When I did my master's at SMU, and I was working full time while I was doing it, and I had to travel. And so the classes, when I had to miss, they mailed me a CD that I would
Yes.
pop in the computer to watch.
Yes. Imagine that.
I mean, I'm glad for
Do
technology
computers even
to
come with CDs anymore? It's like
no.
you'd have to work hard to find one. Yeah.
And they were so ubiquitous for it felt like such a long period. And now to think like, I don't even know how I would play this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I've really enjoyed is the YouTube channel that you and JT have put together of how can you make $100 million doing this? And I really loved, I think it was episode 6, where you shared your screen and walked through how you found the Dun and Bradstreet with the NAICS codes and, found the different companies. And the thing that I really wanted to ask you about is you talk so much about needs versus wants. And I think it just must have been kismet in that I happened to see a social media post of someone asking for money and were listing out what their bills were in a way to sort of convey like, I do need this money. And they had their cell phone on there, they had Netflix on there, they had DoorDash on there. Like, to people today, those are needs and not
Yes.
wants, how I would take it. And so I just find that concept so fascinating and curious to think about.
Well, one person's needs, I guess, are varies from person to person. I'm like you, I can get in my car and go get food. That's another method. I could go to my fridge, if I've got food and make food. But yes, it's like for some people, it's like I can't live without my DoorDash. Yes. Hey, I DoorDashed for lunch today. Matter of fact, I was on a tighter schedule today, and so I let somebody bring me my food. Why not?
Why not? It's available for us to do it. How are you enjoying doing that sort of TV-esque episodic teaching style versus, a seminar or a book series or even a podcast?
Well, I think my entire career I've been a teacher, literally. So, as a senior executive, you're motivating other people, you're talking to people all the time. And, I was never the smartest guy in any room to begin with, so I always saw myself as the chief entertainment officer, is what CEO meant to me. And I could hire really strong, good people who were subject matter experts where I was weak. And so I'll go back to partnership, the theme of this episode. It's like, you know what? I'm an operator. I'm a guy who started a career in a truck, and worked my way up an organizational chart, and definitely on the operational side. Sure, I can read a financial statement and balance sheet, and I understand numbers, but I always considered myself not to be expert, in terms of accounting. And so I was always very reliant to have a strong partnership with a really good CFO, someone who could provide, I'll call it the radar, to bring all the gauges to life on the bridge of my ship. So, I could get insight from data, insight from numbers, help point the operations in the right direction. And so I was always in anytime I came into a company, I'm like, okay, my two key leaders, I'll call it three key leaders. I need a strong numbers driven FP&A, financial planning and analysis type CFO who can, because most of the companies that I ran were kind of blue collar companies where you had varying degrees of business acumen and in the leadership at different levels. So I would have, 50, 60 branches, and branch managers might have a college degree. They might not. They might have started their career in a truck. They may have worked their way up and they had some professional background, but a lot of people who knew operations but weren't necessarily number savants. You give them a spreadsheet, they see numbers. They see numbers and columns, but the data doesn't necessarily speak to them. These are people who could fix a trouble in a business, but they need somebody to point out the path. Hey, these are the three things that are off. Address, spend time in these three areas, and you'd be amazed at what's going to happen to the financial performance of your business unit. So, bringing, insight from data, bringing insight from numbers, and helping to create, actionable intelligence that people of varying business acumens up and down the org chart could actually use. That was an important skill set. Another important partnership for me has always been my CHRO. Every business, everything I always talk about and espouse is that culture is important, and that in today's world, if you want to build a big company, if you want to build an empire, we're going to need lots and lots of people. And to do that, you can't mail it in when it comes to culture anymore. It's like you need, to invest in people. You need to be authentic. You need to be transparent. And so culture is at the cornerstone of every business that I build, which means that my CHRO, another strong partnership that I have to have in a business to be successful. And then that third one, really, I want to focus on growth. I want to focus on bending the growth curve. That means I need a strong COO, someone who's operationally focused, who can keep the trains running on time. Because the more time, go back to my big ship, analogy. I'm on the bridge. I'm charting the course. I'm deciding where the ship is going next. If I spend all my time down below decks, making sure individual departments and compartments are operating efficiently, I'm not on the bridge charting the course. And so a strong COO who can run the below decks, day-to-day operations, keep the trains running on time, make sure customers are delighted, frees me up, to then focus on, where is the company going next? What's the strategic path forward that's going to lead us to the promised land and excellent returns. And so all up and down in my world, partnerships with key people are really important. And it's important that we recognize, just as leaders, where our own weaknesses are. And I don't want groupthink, give me a staff of people who, yes, sir, or, just, pay lip service to whatever I say. That's not helpful. I need people that are, have different skill sets than mine, whose area and subject matter expertise is different than mine, so that collectively we bring a lot more mental acuity and horsepower to, to the overall leadership team and the business.
Well, and that leads me to the question of, when you're doing these buy and builds and you're bringing in these other organizations, what are some of the things that you look out for that maybe certain members aren't going to be the right partners?
Yeah.
And is it better to just kind of cut bait quick, or is there some sort of can they be coached into what you're looking for?
So I think a lot of entrepreneurs, if they're thinking about potentially selling their business, potentially bringing in, a private equity firm or someone to partner with them, if they can get over the hump as to, why I would want to do this. And a lot of entrepreneurs see selling their company as kind of the end of the road. It's a one and done event. And I've bought 58 companies and have convinced 58 entrepreneurs that this is not the end of the road. It's the beginning of the road. It's the first rest stop on the wealth creation highway. And so when we think about bringing in a potential sponsor, a PE firm, it's a scary thought to think about selling your business. It's a scary thought to think about going from being the only shareholder to being a minority shareholder who could get fired, if they're not performing. That's scary. But when I work with these individuals, before they exit, and I think about their strengths and weaknesses, most of them are operational experts in their industry, but they're not finance experts. And so if they're talking to me and they're hearing, it's like I'm thinking about buying companies, I'm thinking about doing a buy and build, but I don't know how to do this, and I don't know where I would get the capital to do this, and I don't have the equity requirements or the down payments. It's like there's all these mysterious things, and so the unknown is what we fear. Well, if I bring in a sophisticated partner that's a complement to my own skill set, I've picked the right partner, they take a lot of that off my plate. It's like I'd never have to worry about capital and where it's going to come from again. It's like I have an institutional shareholder, institutional partner. We're going to do a buy and build. I know my industry. I'm an expert at running my company, and I have the capacity to go out and buy other companies in my industry, and I can roll them up. And operationally, I know how to integrate them. And it's like I can handle all that part. But I don't understand how do I raise the capital? How do I get the money? How do I get the debt? How do I put all of the stuff together? I don't know how to do diligence. Someone's got to teach me how to do that stuff. And it's like, that's where they shine. I bring in that private equity firm, their resources become my resources. They are financial experts. They solve the capital stack for me. And I don't have to worry about, geez, where's the money coming from to pay for that acquisition? All I have to do is focus on, let's find great companies who are run by good people, and let's see if we can't attract them to joining what we're doing. And I've got all these other experts out there who can help me with the things that I don't know. So just like getting a coach, sometimes when I'm building a business, it's imperative, and I always worry about people and their financial future. And I hate to see an entrepreneur with too much risk, which is to say they have too much of their net worth tied up in their business. So when a business gets to a certain size, and I never like to see an entrepreneur have more than 100 million. Speaking of 100 million, can you do this? It's like I never want to see an entrepreneur with more than that in equity in their business not diversify and start pulling some of that wealth out to protect their family against an unknown future, because bad things can happen to businesses. You take COVID as an example. We didn't know, and the world didn't know, the difference between an essential business and a non-essential business until some government weenie came out one day and said, here's what constitutes essential. And if you're not essential, close your doors, and you're potentially out of business. And so many lessons learned painfully, during COVID. But I think, a lot of people recognize that, hey, there really is risk in the world. Planes do fly into buildings. Wars start. Today, just before we started talking, Iran launched a bunch of ballistic missiles at Israel. I mean, there's a war going on in the Middle East right now. It's amazing to me our stock market hasn't really felt the impact of that recently, but things happen. I work with a business in the UK whose business was decimated by the war in Ukraine. A lot of his exports were going to Russia, but when Russia invaded Ukraine, the UK, the British government just, they stopped exports to Russia.
Right.
His business wasn't supporting the war effort, but he lost, his largest customer base, and, unfortunately is still struggling to recover that. So bad things can happen to us. And there are simply just times where we need to diversify our risk, get some chips off the table, be open to working with partners who bring different skill sets to the table, and then leveraging the collective wisdom of that group to take companies to new heights.
Oh, I feel like I gotta raise the energy back up after talking about all this heavy war stuff because you're right. I mean, it's so outside of our control and unpredictable, and it can really damage things. But well, I guess this isn't raising the energy, the question I'm about to ask, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Um, for the majority of the people out there, they're not going to be the ones in private equity doing the buy and builds. And there's a lot of different types of people that listen to this show. So for the person that's in corporate, sometimes private equity can be a dirty word. Like I was actually talking to someone a couple of weeks ago, and they said their company had been bought out by a private equity firm, but they're like, don't worry, it's a good one. And I just laughed hearing it from that perspective because I hadn't really been thinking of it like that. So is there part of the process of how this is communicated to the employees and to let them know that?
Yeah, and the reason why, I wrote the private equity playbook when I did, and the reason why I updated it is because the need still exists. And I just felt that the book, to stay fresh for another 5 to 10 years, needed an update. So I focused on that because the question is still relevant. All we hear in the news are negative stories. We only hear the bad side, of private equity. So let me share a quick story. So the last company I ran was owned by a private equity firm called Ares Management. Ares is they're the world's largest non-bank lender. So private equity debt funds, these guys are the king. But they also have a large private equity portfolio of companies that they own, that they buy, they work with, and grow. When COVID hit, they literally started a foundation inside of every company that they owned, and they seeded it with their own capital, six-figure sum in every company, and they said, CEOs, we want you to take care of your employees. And so employees who are impacted negatively, they have to miss work, they're running out of vacation time, whatever that issue is, they have an unfortunate, death or, of a loved one, or impacted somehow in a negative way. We want you to use this charitable foundation for the benefit of your employees. Well, you didn't hear about that on the news,
Right.
and they taught the companies, how, first of all, they helped us get them set up, so that we were compliant. Then they helped us be creative about how we could use, our own funding within the company, or employees could donate vacation days and get them turned into cash into the foundation so that we could help fellow employees. And it started with COVID. But then it moved to, hey, there was a hurricane in Texas and we've got some people who are flooded out, and so eventually that foundation became a broader purpose tool. But we don't hear about that crap on TV. No one talks about the good things at the private equity firms. And so all
Talk
we
about the
hear.
good things at all anyway.
That's true, right? So all we hear is negative, negativity. So, I would tell you that, my experience working with private equity as a partner for decades, 9 different firms, was that in general, these people care. They're not just paying lip service. They're not just about generating shareholder returns. They care about people. They care about, being good stewards to the companies that they buy. They have a conscience, and so, when you've got thousands and thousands of firms out there, like any ecosystem, you're going to have good firms and bad firms, firms that are more, honest and genuine than others. But my general experience has been very positive working with private equity. It didn't always go, smoothly. It's like it's business as a professional sport played at the highest level. And so there's an intensity, about working with a private equity partner, and I think about like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, arguably two of the best basketball players ever in the history of basketball, both coached by Phil Jackson, both recognizing that to win championships, even though they're the best in the world at their craft, they have to work their rear ends off, and they have
Mhm.
to work hard to to earn the right to compete and win a championship. And it's like, and that's what it can feel like when you're partnered with a big PE firm and you're building a big company. It's intense, and it doesn't always go smoothly. But generally speaking, they do care about the companies. And so when you hear horror stories, a lot of quiet people out there when it comes to telling the good stories that they work with. And so I still think there's this just genuine misunderstanding of what private equity is, how it really operates, how it works. When I do a seminar today, I still ask and start with a basic 10-question quiz on private equity. And you can put 1,000 people in a room. They can all be multimillionaires. They can all be successful business owners. And I still bet you 90% of the people in that room fail my basic 10-question quiz, multiple choice. 90% of the people in the room fail it, because although we hear the term and we hear it semi-regularly now because there's so many PE firms out there buying so many companies, but we just really have a lack of understanding. And so that's why I felt it was important to update that book and keep it fresh so that I can keep educating business owners into what is this thing and how can it work? Because that's the ultimate partnership right there. It's an intense partnership. Owner, subject matter expert, expert in a field, in an industry, financial backer, not an expert in the industry, but when that partnership works well, can really be, a beneficial relationship where all of a sudden you as an entrepreneur have unlimited capital. You're limited only by your dreams on how fast you can grow your empire. You have a partner who can bring some depth and acumen to help you get through the M&A process, help teach you how to evaluate companies, how to do diligence, how to integrate, very good at that kind of stuff, and it's a partnership. And when it works really well. And, hey, when it doesn't, oh, well, we gear up for next season and try it again.
That's right. That's right. And thank goodness there is a book like this so that people can learn more about it. I mean, I know I always thought I didn't really know much about it until you, and working with you, meeting you, learning from you has really changed my perspective on private equity and what it really is. And you do such a fantastic job at making it so easy to understand, even if it's not always easy to implement.
Well, thank you.
Adam, this has been so fantastic. Thank you again for being a guest on the show. I appreciate it so very much.
Well, thank you for having me. Good luck to all your listeners out there. I hope there's some nugget of wisdom in here that you can take forward.
Absolutely. And if you want to learn more, there are the books. I will have the links to all of the Amazon book for Adam, so you can get all of his books there. I will also put links to the YouTube, all of his podcast links. I mean, you are amazing at putting out the content. You are not the gatekeeper of this information. You will willingly share it, and we all are grateful for it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Until next time, everyone, take care.